Random things happen in games. Not only the truly strange and wonderful,
where did the tree go?
but also truly random events. For those truly random events, video games use an internal random number generator to provide the basis for every random event in a game. However, these generators, especially in older games, aren't actually random. They follow a set function, and if a player does the exact same sequence of inputs, the random number generator spits out the same sequence of values every time. Sometimes you can use various tricks to ensure certain events happen every time, and sometimes you can't. But where does the switch locations in Donkey Kong 64's Mad Jack fight lie in this spectrum? Can we abuse glitches to get favourable outcomes, or are we all doomed to playing the luck game? Let's find out. To start, you might ask, how is RNG determined in Donkey Kong 64? But first, we need to talk about binary representation. When counting, humans use the decimal system, where every digit is any number between 0 and 9. There are 10 possible values of a digit in the decimal system, so this is a base 10 counting system. When you take a number which has many digits, let's say 128, you can take the value of the digit and multiply it by the base system number to the power of its position. With this, you get the position value. You can then add all of these position values together to get the original value. Simple stuff. When it comes to computers, they use base 2, otherwise known as binary. Each digit can either be a 1 or a 0. The same method as above applies. You multiply the value of the digit with the base number to the power of its position. Adding all of these together gets the value. This is certainly a longer way to represent a number, but it's simpler for a computer to understand whether a light switch is on or off than anything else. For reference, each digit in binary is also known as a bit. So back to RNG. How does Donkey Kong 64 determine it? Every time RNG is called, the game starts off by multiplying the old RNG value by 31,415,821. The game then adds 1 to the result of this multiplication and takes the lowest 32 bits of this and sets this as the new RNG value. Now, this function is called every time some process requires RNG. This can mean that there are some frames where it's not called at all, and some where it's called multiple times per frame. So guessing its value on a particular frame is pretty much impossible without a bitwise calculator and emulation tools. So the next point of conversation is how the game translates this random value into where the switches are placed. When the switches are called to position themselves, the game splits the process into 2 parts. First, it determines a white switch location, and then after the white switch location has been determined, the process for the blue switch is then done. The process for the white switch is the same as the process for the blue switch, and so the process for determining a switch location is as follows. The game first calls the RNG function to generate a new random number. The game then takes the 3 bits in positions 15 through 17 of the RNG value. These 3 bits serve as an index for a search and can be any value between 0 and 7. This searches through a list of switch positions the switch can be on. The game then tries to place the switch on this position. Now, if this was the end of the process, then it would lead to some problematic scenarios where there is a 1 in 8 chance of the switch spawning under Mad Jack, which would be quite unfair to the player. So the game does a bit of validation. If the switch is on the same square as Mad Jack, or the Kong, or the 4 squares directly north, south, east and west of the Kong, then the game cancels the switch spawning process and starts from the beginning again until it finds a valid switch location. Interestingly, because of how the board is laid out internally in memory, If you are on the far western or far eastern squares, the validation cancels out a square which is not adjacent to the Kong. Since you can move in a way to manipulate where Mad Jack is, and the player location is completely controllable, this means you can cancel out 5 of the 8 locations when trying to validate the location, meaning that there are only 3 places where the correct switch will spawn with this setup. So great, we now know the formula of how switch locations are determined. How are the squares of Mad Jack and a Kong determined though? Well, for Mad Jack, since he is locked to being on a certain square, this is simple. However, the Kong can be in the middle of 2 or 4 squares. So how does the game decide where a Kong is in this scenario? The game has a list internally where the center of each switch is horizontally. The game goes through these locations, left to right, bottom to top, and it keeps score of which square has the smallest distance between the center of the square and the Kong location, rounding down to the nearest integer. If a square's distance beats the current record, then that new record is saved, and that square is listed as the current winner until another square beats that score. After it has gone through all 16 squares, the winner is set as the square which the Kong is on. This does come with 2 noteworthy points. First of all, where do you think the game would position a Kong if the Kong was considered in the center of 4 squares? Under the process, when the game reaches the square southwest of the Kong, it would determine that as the new smallest distance. When it gets to the next square on, since the distance between the Kong and the square isn't lower than the southwestern square, that's not listed as the new winner. The same applies for the northwestern and northeastern squares, meaning that the southwestern square would be considered the winner despite the Kong being equidistant to all 4 squares. Now the best caveat of all is that the game doesn't check the position of the Kong when the switches are about to spawn. No. The game checks your position at the point of where Mad Jack is just about to take his final jump. Therefore, if the Kong moves diagonally from one square to another, making sure not to cross the square boundary until after Mad Jack starts his final jump, there is a 1 in 6 chance that the switch will spawn on the same square the Kong is on. Despite this being a very recent discovery, a few of the members of the Donkey Kong 64 speedrunning community have already come up with solutions to reduce the amount of squares on average you will need to take. Take this example from Horhay the Dragon. If the player is registered as on square 10 and Mad Jack is on square 9, that immediately cuts out 4 of the 8 switch locations. If DK then moves diagonally down left just before his final jump, 2 of the 4 remaining switches are only 1 square away. The remaining 2, whilst not as optimal, are only 2.2 squares away. This gives an average distance to switch of 1.61 squares. To put this in context, before this discovery, the lowest average was 1.847 squares with the following configuration. This isn't the end though, and there will undoubtedly be patterns that come out of this which are perhaps even better than Horhay's suggestion. If you want to have a play around with the spawning algorithm, I have converted the game code into a website which you can mess around with. Does this mean that we have finally rid ourselves of the chains of RNG for this fight? No. In the end, it's still luck. However, getting an understanding of how the fight works certainly improves your chances. To fully break free of the bounds of RNG, we would have to find a way to lock the RNG to a specific value. Now, the game does set RNG to a specific value upon entering the title demos, but getting this to happen for a fight means alternating between the title demo and not in the title demo every frame, which is about as impossible as it sounds. Until that day comes, likely on the same day that pigs start flying, we will have to put up with the luck that we're given, hoping one day for the balance to tip in our favour.